Fourth grade friends. All right, fourth grade friends. Excuse me. All right, can we please give our full and complete attention to our guests today? If you guys would introduce yourselves again.
Good afternoon. I'm Carol. Hi. Hi. I'm Carol Boston Weatherford, an author.
I am Jeffrey Boston Weatherford, illustrator.
Author and rapper, as you know. So we're going to be focusing on two books this afternoon, but because we didn't really get into much about our backgrounds this morning, we're going to start by telling you a little bit about our backgrounds. That's me, kindergarten or first grade. I made up my first poem when I was in first grade. I told my mother when she was driving me home from school that I had made up a poem. I proceeded to recite these words. There are 4 seasons in each year: winter, summer, spring, and fall. Which one do you like best of all? I like winter. That's when the wind gives its pleasant call. My mom was so surprised that she parked the car even though we were just 2 blocks from home, asked me if I'd say my poem again, and when I said it the second time, she wrote it down, which was a good thing because I didn't know how to spell all the words, and we'd probably be still sitting there and I'd be saying, "How do you spell pleasant?" So months later, I used her cursive handwriting to teach myself to write in cursive. So I wrote that in 1962, and at the time I would have been 6 years old. I continued writing. It wasn't just a one-hit wonder. My dad was a high school printing teacher, and he gave his students typesetting exercises using my poems. That meant that before there were computers in homes, schools, or offices, I got to see my work in print. These are some of the poems that they printed, and they were on cards cardstock the size of index cards. I also wrote for my 6th grade class newspaper. The article that I wrote actually was an op-ed piece. That means opinion editorial. I eventually became an editorial writer for newspapers. Not in 6th grade though. Yeah, not in 6th grade. The topic was, is homework really necessary? So let's take a vote. Is homework really necessary? Yes. Hands up high. No. Well, the noes have it. The noes have it. Okay, I'll tell you where I came down on the topic. My position was a bit of a compromise. I said that homework was necessary, but should not be given on weekends. Good compromise? Yeah. No homework period, okay. Homework should just be outlawed, huh? Is that good consensus? Okay. Years later, I had my first publication credit, professional publication credit, meaning that it was published by someone other than my dad and someplace other than a school publication. I had a poem called "I Made of Jazz" that I typed on a typewriter. I still didn't have a computer in 1980. And the poem was in Metropolitan Magazine in Baltimore. And when I saw my work in print, I decided that I wanted to make writing my life's work, and I wanted to be an author of books. And lo and behold, 15 years later, I had my first book published, which is not in here. It's Juneteenth Jamboree. I think we showed that in another presentation. But this slide is showing, this is a more recent book, All Rise, the story of Ketanji Brown Jackson. And it shows my revision process. When I first wrote the biography of Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was the first African-American Supreme Court Justice, she had just been nominated by President Biden. And I wrote her story in prose. Let me get you to say prose, and we'll have questions later. Prose. Anybody know what prose is? Yes. Prose. Oh, okay. You're thinking of P-R-O-S. This is P-R-O-S-E. But yes, you're right. Those are homonyms, right? Prose, P-R-O-S-E, means writing that's in paragraph form. So, generally that's the type of writing that most of us do. Most people do. It's not in poetry. So that means prose as opposed to being poetry. So I wrote the biography in prose. I sold the manuscript. Let me get you to say manuscript. A manuscript is an unpublished work of writing. I sold the manuscript to a publisher, and then a few weeks later, I heard Ketanji Brown Jackson make reference to a Maya Angelou poem, "And Still I Rise," and I decided that I wanted to write Ketanji Brown Jackson's story in poetry rather than in prose. And so what you see here is the beginning of the manuscript in prose and the beginning of the revised manuscript in poetry. And when I submitted the poetic version, my editor said, "Now it really sings like Carol Boston Weatherford wrote it." Which brings me to us two collaborating. So Jeffrey will tell you about himself and I'll talk about some of our collaborations.
All right, so by a show of hands, how many artists do we have? How many artists are in the building? Okay, cool. I find it's like as you get to older and older classrooms, people start lowering their hands, and I want to make a very clear distinction. You don't have to feel like you are good at art to be an artist, right? You can like art and you can be an artist. So I'm in a room full of my peers. I love it. So this wonderful hyper-realistic self-portrait I drew when I was in kindergarten. And when I took it to my mom, she put it into this giant frame. So how do you think that made me feel? Good, proud. Made me feel amazing. I felt like every piece of art that I do should be framed and go into a museum, except as a kid, we really don't have a concept of money or art supplies costing money, so my mom would do something very special. I would take her my artwork, like, "Hey mom, can you frame this piece of art?" She'd be like, "Wow, that's a nice tree." I'm like, "That's a picture of me, mom." She's like, "Oh, okay, cool. Let's put this into the gallery of the refrigerator." So by a show of hands, how many of you have ever been in the gallery of the refrigerator? All right, so go ahead and take that hand that you have raised, pat yourself on the back, because you have already been in the most prestigious gallery there is on the planet. All great artists get our start right there. So you're already in league with the legends, all right? So as time progressed, like all the artists that came before me, I drew inspiration from the world around me. So what are some things that kids frequently watch? Starts with a car, ends with a tune. Okay, so anime was like getting its like foothold in America when I was young. So some of you may recognize it, but this is a picture of my notes from 3rd grade. I had about 7 lines at the top of the page dedicated to taking notes, and then the entire rest of the page was dedicated to cultivating my artistic ability. And
I'm gonna spring a skit on you. You know that. We've got a skit.
Okay, we
So
have a
rather than
skit.
telling, we're gonna show you.
Okay. So how many of you like to play video games? All the way. Okay. So I loved to play video games when I was a kid. I had a Nintendo 64, which was like it was the first 3D video game. The graphics were like next level at the time. It's like, it looks real. It didn't look real at all. But I was playing N64. I'd been playing all weekend. All right, so you have to envision me much smaller.
And I will say, the gaming played off because you were like semi-professional. The only reason he wasn't professional was because I wouldn't go take him to the tournaments in New York. That's the only reason wasn't professional.
Right.
All right. Okay.
Anyway.
So anyway, Jeffrey, it's Sunday, 8 o'clock, and it's time to turn off the video games and focus on the week ahead. So turn it off and get me your backpack. Look in your backpack, see if you have any permission slips that need to be signed, any projects that are coming up, or any tests coming up this
Can
week.
I just finish this level? I can't.
Well, you've been
save it.
playing all weekend, so no, you cannot finish the level. You
But I'm about
you have reached the
be-
level. You have plateaued for the
pause.
weekend. Pause it and stop it. Stop it. And let's look and get your backpack, please.
How many of you have bad handwriting?
Okay,
Okay, that's me. So, oh, it's upside down. Okay, so I have a project due.
Okay, I'm glad you
Monday.
look Monday. Like, not. I know you're not telling me you have a project due tomorrow. And you've been on video games all weekend. Can you believe this?
Monday.
Oh no, please. Tomorrow. Okay. I just can't believe it. I can't believe it. I'm about to blow my stack. All right, turn the game off. Turn it off. Turn it off.
Can I just?
Turn it off. And what is the project that you forgot about until this moment?
That would be a infographic about a state, Colorado.
Okay. All right. Now, I have no. You know that Hobby Lobby and Michael's all the stores are closed now. So we're gonna have to figure out what we can use around the house to do get your project done by tomorrow. So just plan on being up all night.
Okay, so if I'm up all night, then I still have.
No. That can be the controller because you're not gonna be. Let's give it here. You're not gonna be playing video games for a month of Sundays. How long should I punish him for? Oh no, there was a punishment. There was a punishment. There was a punishment. I can't remember how long it was for, but he and his sister ended it when they found the video game, the console, that his dad had put away on the top shelf of our closet, and they found it, and they broke the closet shelf getting it down. So, serve me right, huh?
What was the punishment?
It was a few weeks of no video games, but it turned into much longer.
And in the future, when he was punished, his father would put the video games in the trunk of the car and lock it.
Good idea.
So, the outcome.
So, as a direct result of this, I would say propensity that I had to draw in class and not pay attention. My teacher and of course my mother, they wanted me to stop drawing in class, and my mother decided to put me into art classes outside of school, and she also went to my teacher every week to get the assignments to make sure that I wouldn't forget anything.
And I wouldn't lose my mind.
Right, exactly. So she put me into art classes outside of school. I went to a place called the Greensboro Cultural Center in Greensboro, North Carolina. I grew up in High Point, so that's one city over from Greensboro, and it was a 5-story building that had different styles of art on every single floor. So there was like dance on the bottom floor, photography on the second floor, sculpture, different potteries, like crafts, painting, drawing, all different levels of art. And I had the opportunity to study with different college level artists and beyond. And while I was there, I did something called a gesture drawing. Can you say gesture drawing?
Gesture drawing.
Now, if you've ever watched the news, they've ever talked about a court case, and then you see like a funky drawing with somebody that doesn't really look like them, but it is them, that's a gesture drawing, and that is a job that professional artists can have. So I had, and a gesture drawing is a drawing from life done very fast. So this is an African parrot that I drew. It was sitting in front of me, squawking, talking, being a parrot. And of course, you can't tell a parrot to, all right, strike a pose, model. It's not going to really, understand this human concept. So I had to draw this very fast. This took about 15 minutes to draw, and I knew it was good because my mom framed it. She only framed the good ones, all right? So as time progressed, I continued to practice, right? Practice makes perfect. And practice makes progress, and practice makes permanent. The way that you practice,
Good.
great, yes, better, exactly. And the way that you practice is the way that you perform. Right? So I know that everybody in here might not want to be a children's book illustrator or a children's book author or a rapper or, but there's something that when you grow up, you say you want to be a I love doing that at schools. So, in order to become that gas station worker, you're going to have to practice on a register, right? But in order to be that veterinarian, you're going to have to study and practice, right? Right? So in order to become the thing that you dream about, the profession that you dream about, practice, that's the bricks that build the bridge to your dreams, okay? So between my junior and my senior year, I had the opportunity to study under a master level artist by the name of Joseph Johnson. He's also a children's book illustrator today. He was my assistant principal at my high school, and I went to his house between during the summer between my junior and my senior year, and he quite literally reframed the way that I drew and approached a piece of paper. And from there, I saw a parabolic growth in my artistic ability, right? There's somebody out there who has the knowledge that you seek, right? They can do whatever you want to do very well. They're a master. And in order to reach new heights, get mentorship. You stand on the shoulders of giants to be able to see new heights, right? And so I drew another self-portrait.
Wow. That's so
I
So the space between this hyper-realistic self-portrait that I drew when I was 17 and this hyper-realistic, biologically and anatomically correct portrait that I drew when I was in kindergarten, that is just practice. Okay, show of hands. How many like this one better than the 17-year-old one? Okay.
He actually looks just like that too.
Right. Like the 17-year-old
Wait,
version.
did you have
I did.
Did you actually have that?
I did. And I also actually had this haircut. I had little circles just floating off my head.
And I framed that one too, so.
Whoa.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Don't touch a phone that is not yours.
So the style of art that I'm known for now, all of my illustration projects have been in scratchboard. Can you say scratchboard? Scratchboard. Now what scratchboard is, those forms of art are additive, meaning if you have a pencil, you're adding graphite. If you have paint, you're adding paint. If you have a pen, you're adding ink. If you're doing a collage, you're adding pieces of paper, color, that type of thing. But with scratchboard, the entire paper comes inked black. And then I use these nibs, these metal tools to scrape the surface off the top. How many of you have ever done scratchboard? Right? Okay, so typically you have like one instance of scratchboard in like elementary school, and then you just never touch it again. So I had scratchboard for the first time in the first grade with Mr. Gonzalez, where we created our own scratchboard. We used crayons to color the bottom page, and then we painted over it in black acrylic, and then we used like paper clips to scrape. Okay, cool, yeah. To scrape off the top to reveal the rainbow underneath. And then in the 9th grade with Mrs. Coggins, I had another instance of scratchboard. So those two instances of scratchboard planted a seed in my mom, and we're gonna have time for questions at the end, so just remember your question. That planted the seed in my mom to have her suggest that I work in scratchboard for our first title, You Can Fly, which this is a portrait of Howard A. Wooten Jr., who was one of the original Tuskegee Airmen, the first African-American pilots during World War II, and my scratchboard rendering on your right.
That's good.
I appreciate it.
Wait, you made all
Thank
this?
you.
Oh my god.
Thank you.
Did you make all of this?
Yes. So, alright.
Did you make it by
That's practice.
Yes.
Practice.
And
Did you make it by
yes. By
Oh,
hand.
very good. And he specializes in drawing hands as well. If you saw the progression of his hand drawings, you can see that his practice is paying
It
off.
all started with Dragon Ball Z, because in Dragon Ball Z, what do? All the hand blasts, and if you couldn't draw Goku doing the Kamehameha wave, yeah, you weren't like one of the cool art kids, you know?
I'm not a fool.
Right. So I started out doing traditional scratchboard, which traditional scratchboard is like physical, you could actually pick it up and hold it. But as time progressed, scratchboard is very strenuous, so I was like developing carpal tunnel in your hands. Carpal tunnel in your hands is like a muscle bone disorder that essentially degenerates your hand, and very painful, and you eventually like lose functioning of your hand. So as an artist, can't have that happening. So I took about a year or so break without doing any art or illustration, and I developed a technique to do scratchboard to mimic the traditional scratchboard on an iPad in a program called Procreate. How many of you have heard of Procreate? Okay, cool. Yeah, so Procreate, that's definitely a professional art tool. A lot of illustrators use Procreate to create illustrations, including myself. All of the artwork that I completed for Kin, Rooted in Hope, is digital scribing.
At my suggestion, by the way.
My mom, she wants to just take credit.
At my
for
suggestion,
everything.
he was
Some
resistant
parents
to
wanna
the idea.
Take credit for everything.
Exactly. Yeah, well, who made
Anyway,
these things
so
on
during the time of World War II and before, of course, there was something called segregation. What's segregation?
separating
That's exactly right. So that's what they separated bus stations, railroads, restaurants, lunch counters, basically everything, all the way down to the ground that we were buried in. And that was something that I didn't know until, right, even to the very dirt. They segregated the dirt. Right?
And when we think about segregation in the United States, we usually think about black people being separated from white people, but in different parts of the country, Native Americans were separated from white people, as were Latinx people.
And these are signs that I used as my references. So references are the subjects that I draw from, because in illustration, I know in school it's like cool to draw from your mind. That's like one of like the high points of art. But when you get into the professional art world, drawing out of your mind isn't necessarily something that is sought after. The more that you look at a subject, is art tip, right? If you want to draw something realistic, the way to do that is to look at what you are drawing. That's the easiest way. And you should be looking at your subject more than you are looking at your paper. That's like pro tip from Mr. Johnson, circa 2006. Okay, so there are different ways to. First, what is an activist? What would an activist do?
like other calling people to their dreams.
Right, so essentially they stand up against laws that they deem are not equal, right? If they feel like somebody is getting the short end of the stick, meaning they're not getting what they deserve in life, then they will practice these acts, civil disobedience, nonviolent protest. Hopefully all protests are nonviolent, but sometimes that's not the case. Of course, marches like the March on Washington with Dr. Martin Luther King, picketing, standing outside these places of business, or outside of court buildings or government buildings, and showing their disdain for whatever laws that they are protesting. You have the sit-ins, like the Greensboro sit-ins, where college students went into lunch counters to protest the fact that they could not be served there. And then you have boycotts, like most recent one I can think of is the boycott against Target. Freedom rides. We have freedom rides where they went down to the South, freedom riders they were called, to test the actual, if they changed, since they did change the law, to test if they would actually allow African American people to sit wherever they wanted on the bus.
And activism has been used to fight for racial equality. That was the civil rights movement. It's been used to fight for gender equality. It's been used to fight for environmental justice, freedom of choice. Many different things. Right now, activists are also fighting for against banned books. So, yeah, the activism has been used on many different fronts. Oh, you wouldn't tell this. So we're going to focus now on Call Me Miss Hamilton, One Woman's Case for Equality and Respect. It was my second collaboration with Jeffrey and his first picture book project.
Has anybody heard of Mary Hamilton before we started showing hands? Okay. So she was, of course, a civil rights activist, but she was in the same, during the same era as Dr. Martin Luther King. In fact, she knew Dr. Martin Luther King. So I'm going to read some of call me Miss Hamilton. In 1960, she joined that fight. As a member of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, Mary went on freedom rides. Busloads of black and white people from the North risked their lives to test a new court ruling that outlawed segregation on interstate buses and railroads. Down south, the freedom riders' courage was tested. They saw the color line with their own eyes. Town after town, colored drinking fountains, restrooms, waiting rooms, and entrances, and whites-only restaurants, hotels, theaters, parks, and swimming pools. Sometimes the protesters couldn't believe their ears. Without so much as a second thought, whites called African Americans out of their names, addressing grown men as boy and women as girl or auntie, rather than Miss, Mrs., or Mr. And African Americans were expected to answer. Hecklers called the protesters even worse, names too hateful to print. In 1961, Mary was arrested in Mississippi. In her mugshot, the sign around her neck bears no name, only a number, 21068. Again and again, Mary was arrested. In Tennessee, Mary was arrested again, this time for picketing a theater that made black moviegoers sit in the balcony. When the mayor came to the jail and called her Mary, she demanded that he call her Miss Hamilton. If you don't know how to speak to a lady, she said, then get out of my cell. That wasn't the only time Mary was treated like she was second class due to her skin color. In an Alabama court, a white prosecutor called her by her first name. Mary refused to answer unless he called her Miss Hamilton. The judge ordered her to respond. Mary refused again. The judge charged her with contempt of court and threw her in jail. 5 days later, she got out and refused to pay the $50 fine. Mary had news for that judge. She was not afraid to fight in court for what's right. With NAACP lawyers on her side, she fought the contempt charge all the way to the United States Supreme Court. In 1964, the highest court of the land ruled in Mary's favor, deciding that everyone in court deserved respect. Miss Hamilton had won. From then on, judges and lawyers addressed all African Americans in court as Mrs., Miss, Mrs., or Mr., the same as whites, all because of the Miss Mary case.
All right, so we're going to move on to another unsung hero of the civil rights movement, using the book A Song for the Unsung, Bayard Rustin, the man behind the 1963 March on Washington. The book is co-authored by Rob Sanders, written by me, he's my co-author, and illustrated by Byron McCrae. And I'm not going to read all the books so we can have time for questions, but I'll hit some of the highlights. What Bayard Rustin saw on the morning of August 28, 1963 was not what he expected. Quiet stillness echoed off the Washington Monument. The steady beat of Bayard's footsteps mingled with the voices of security guards, reporters, and a handful of others. Where were the crowds of protesters he had worked so hard to bring to Washington, D.C.? For 8 weeks, he'd been orchestrating the protest, hoping to bring 100,000 to the nation's capital. The moment had almost arrived for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Where were the protesters? Bayard had faith that the crowds would arrive. Sing My Lord What a Morning as the sun rises over the nation's capital. Sing Pray On to call on the hopes of the ancestors. Bayard was born in Westchester, Pennsylvania, to a Quaker grandmother. He learned the church's teachings, and including a belief in nonviolence. He also learned about the injustices that African Americans faced. His grandmother supported the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Sing Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen under the burden of racism. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but Jesus. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. Sing, lift every voice and sing the national anthem to draw on the strength of those freedom fighters. Bayard went to Oberlin College and he sang with the quartet. They performed on the road. His vibrant tenor brought listeners to tears. A reporter spotted Bayard. He asked the question Bayard must have been thinking. Where are the crowds? Bayard pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, examined it, and then replied, "Everything is right on schedule." What the reporter didn't know was that the paper was blank. But perhaps Bayard's hopes were as empty as that sheet of paper. Sing ain't gonna let nobody turn me round to the doubters. As a young man, Bayard's feelings about justice, peace, and nonviolence grew stronger and stronger. And he put his feelings about equality and pacifism into action. Sing every time I feel the spirit to keep the faith. When he refused to give up his seat on a bus, Bayard was beaten and arrested. He did not fight back. Sing traveling shoes to take a stand by sitting down. When he refused to fight in World War II or to support the war, Bayard was sent to prison for more than 2 years. Behind bars, he spoke up for equality, working to integrate the prisons so black and white prisoners were treated equally. Sing down by the riverside to advocate for peace. Sing the gospel train along the first ever Freedom Ride. Once out of prison, Bayard joined another protest against segregated buses. Again, he was arrested. This time he was sentenced to a chain gang. But the harsh treatment did not change Bayard's commitment to civil rights and his dedication to peaceful protest. Sing, I'm going to sit at the welcome table to demand justice. You remember that from this morning? We sang it this morning. When Bayard staged a one-man sit-in at a whites-only lunch counter, he was again arrested, but jail time did not stop him from fighting for what he knew was right. As a young black gay man, Bayard Rustin was also learning about another kind of inequality and injustice. Back then, men who loved men and women who loved women could not socialize together. Doing so could get you arrested. Bayard knew that firsthand, and revealing that you were gay could mean losing your job, your friends, or even your family. Bayard's family stood by him, but being gay threatened his civil rights mission. Some African American leaders didn't want to work with him. Some white lawmakers tried to shame him. Still, Bayard kept on fighting for equality, and he did so while being nonviolent. Sing, I've been viewed when society frowns on who you are. I've been viewed and I've been scorned. Oh, I've been viewed and I've been scorned. I've been duped and I've been scorned. I'm gonna talk about it sure as I'm born. Under the leadership of A. Philip Randolph, who was a black union organizer, and with the help of a small staff, Bayard, in those 8 weeks, looked to all the details of the march. Letter writing, calls, phone calls, raising money, posters, banners, and buttons were created, buses, carpools, trains, and planes were scheduled, maps were drawn, volunteers were in place, speakers and singers were enlisted. All the preparations were complete, even 80,000 box lunches for the marchers. Of course, the best preparations in the world could not guarantee that the march would be peaceful or successful. Bayard knew that peaceful protest was often met with violence. Sing, when I've done the best I can, when the hour has come. Years earlier, Bayard had traveled to India to learn about nonviolent protests from followers of Mahatma Gandhi. In fact, it was Bayard Rustin who taught Martin Luther King those principles of nonviolence, which were employed during the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. Dr. King led the Montgomery bus boycott, and nonviolence was at the center. From then on, the civil rights movement would preach and practice peaceful protest. Sing, I've got peace like a river to commit to nonviolent resistance. Sing, when the Saints go marching in, as thousands from across the nation arrive at the National Mall. You all know that song? Oh, let's sing it. Oh, when the Saints go marching in, oh, when the Saints go marching in, oh, I want to be in that number when the Saints go marching in. So by 9 o'clock, there were 40,000 people gathered. By 10:30, 90,000 people. And by the end of the day, the crowd exceeded even Bayard's expectations. He was looking for how many people, you remember? 100,000. 250,000 people stood beneath the blazing summer sun. Led by Dr. King, the march began around noon. The people, there were black and white people there, young and old, men and women. They were carrying signs. They walked hand in hand. Some of the signs read, well, you can see what they read on the screen. One row behind Dr. King marched Bayard Rustin, a gay black man, the man responsible for orchestrating the march. Sing Walk Together, Children, as protesters march along the mile-long route. Bayard was used to not being in the spotlight. His name had been left off important reports he had co-authored. He had been a trusted advisor to Dr. King and then had been let go. Some would have nothing to do with Bayard. After all, they must have thought, what does a gay man have to offer us or our cause? But when A. Philip Randolph was put in charge of the March on Washington, he knew immediately the man he wanted as his deputy, Bayard Rustin. Sing This Little Light of Mine from behind the scenes. Bayard did not, you want to sing? Let's try to save time for questions. Bayard did not have time to think about any of that as the crowd of marchers gathered at the mall. Sing If I Had a Hammer to Tear Down Walls That Divide Us. Joan Baez, folk singer, led the crowd in singing We Shall Overcome. Music had always been at the center of Bayard's life. Songs from church, songs with the college quartet, songs he wrote, sang, and recorded, prison songs, chain gang songs, songs from the countries he visited, songs of the people he met, songs of peace and of protest. Mahalia Jackson sang right before Martin Luther King gave his famous speech. The song she sang was How I Got Over, and then Dr. King gave his speech. In front of him stood a mosaic of Americans, most of whom did not know Bayard Rustin's name. Bayard Rustin followed up, speaking after Dr. King. They didn't know even of his role of bringing them together on that historic day. He reported to the crowd after Marian Anderson sang He's Got the Whole World in His Hands, that the demands of the marchers had been taken to the White House and had been presented to President Kennedy. And it read, "It is now time for you to act." One by one, Bayard read the demands of the march. Again and again, the crowd cheered, yes. You want to read the last page, Jeffrey?
The 250,000 marchers left that day committed to work, vote, and protest nonviolently for civil rights. Thousands of reporters, photographers, and other members of the media shared the story of the peaceful march with America and the world. The monumental march led to the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That law ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination. A quiet man orchestrated it all. A man behind a movement, an unsung hero, a gay African American, Bayard Rustin. Finally, a song for you, singing "Ain't That Good News When the Day Is Finally Done."
So that is the story of Bayard Rustin. I think we have some time for questions. And your hand's the first one up.
About how long did it take to write
That book. Well, because I had a collaborator, we worked on it on some weekends, maybe over 2 or 3 weeks. But we only worked on it on weekends. Yes.
Do you do Sgraffito? Do you know what it is?
You want to tell me?
So you paint slip, which is like wet clay. It's a bit like paint, but it's made out of clay onto kilns clay. And then once it semi-dries, you take a skewer and you etch into it. So it's a bit like scratch paper, except on clay and paint.
Very interesting.
And it's fairly easy.
Okay.
What is a chain
A chain gang. So when I don't know if they do chain gangs.
No, they don't do
still.
chain gangs, but you may have you ever seen prisoners, inmates working on the side of the road, like picking up trash and that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well, back in the early 20th century, those people would have been chained together. And they might have been working, they wouldn't be picking up trash necessarily, but they did things like work on railroads and other public projects. But they would be chained together, and there'd be a prison guard standing with a gun. They did a lot of hard labor, really hard labor. Yes.
Can you freestyle?
Can I freestyle? I used to freestyle a long time ago when I was.
He can't freestyle, but it's been a while. And if you give him a chance, it may take longer than it takes me to walk a mile.
Oh. So my mom's trying to battle rap me right
No,
now.
we're not gonna battle rap.
Yes, you are.
Just take, you want to take another question or you have something you'd like to say?
Okay, so we really like history and stuff. Yeah. And we have like for you guys, it's like we have like this. Yeah, it's called the Harry's. I'm president. Yeah.
We might hear that. Let's save that for the very, very end, okay? And let somebody get some more questions in, all the way to that.
No.
Yeah.
Questions about what we've learned.
Not today. Let's try to get some questions in.
Questions about the excuse me, fourth grade. Questions about the writing process.
Right. Your questions about writing, publishing, research, maybe? Yes.
How many books have you written?
I have actually lost count of how many books I've written, but it's more than 80 and fewer than 90.
Oh God.
I'm hoping I can get to 100 before I am 100.
Elliot?
Who's your favorite rapper?
My favorite rapper.
What about yourself?
I like that. Myself. So myself, Jeffrey, Jeff, JB. No, that's all me. That's a little joke. But I would say Jay Monty. He's like one of my favorite rappers.
Any other questions related to what we've learned about writing, about the civil rights
And
movement?
we welcome questions from teachers as well.
Luca?
What's the favorite book that you've ever read?
I'd say the book that my favorite is Kin Rooted in Hope because it's a family history and I was able to work on it with my son. So that's my favorite.
Can you say the name of that again?
Kin, K-I-N, Rooted in Hope. And it's for middle school and young adult. I was 8 years old when I wrote my first book. It was about trees, and I illustrated it with colored pencils, stapled it together, put it on my bookshelf, and eventually my mother threw it away. So it's a land-
The
oh, she didn't know I was
audacity.
gonna be famous.
The audacity.
Seraphine?
What is your favorite rap song that you have ever sung before?
My favorite rap song that I've ever sung before. I mean, I guess it would be "Wrap It Up." It's gave the most impact. I've been in front of crowds of like thousands of people. I think it was like 3,000 people, like the biggest crowd that I've been in front of, and it was like shaking the floor, concert type of deal. So that was pretty amazing.
What was like the longest like that you how long did it take for you to do it?
It would be Kin, Rooted in Hope. The one about our family history dating all the way back to the 1700s. That's something that my mom says she's been working on her entire life, like gathering up the material because we've been going down to this land, well, going up to this land rather, both her entire life and my entire life as well. And it also has the largest collection of illustrations in it that I've ever done. So it has over 50 illustrations, and you can imagine how long that process took. Yep.
How can remember the video that you did in the theater? How is it on YouTube or
No, it's not. It's just for you all today.
And we're still hoping it might become an audio book, DVD.
Yeah. What is your
My rap name, Jeffrey.
Nobody asked me what mine was. I have a rap name.
What's your rap?
CB Dub. My students gave it to me when I taught in the top class.
See? Where was that battle rap energy?
Well, Landon, do you want to ask your question and then I'll ask my final question?
What was your first rap?
My first rap. I wrote, no, I don't even remember it. It was a long time ago in 2000 and I want to say 7, actually.
That's like
20 years ago, basically. I've been rapping for quite some time. Yeah.
So, friends,
song.
my question is, and so right now in our study, our year-long study is about what, in social studies, it's about what is a revolution, what leads to a revolution, what causes a revolution, what prompts people to want to revolutionize. Right now, we are working on learning about the Underground Railroad. our final unit of study is on the civil rights movement. And so my question, or my wondering is, what words of, like, advice, or words of, like,
Wisdom.
what would you tell us that we should really be, like, thinking really, intentionally about when we start to do our civil rights movement work, or what, like, nuggets of knowledge, because I notice a lot of your texts, which we will read again during our unit, are very much connected to civil rights. So I guess I'm asking more of an open-ended question of what, you know.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and just answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
And
Sorry,
and
I'll
Jeffrey
stop
may answer.
questioning.
Well, first of all, the revolution begins with you,
Right.
with the individual. And although Martin Luther King Jr. was the most prominent leader of the civil rights movement, just like Harriet Tubman was the most prominent leader of the Underground Railroad, they weren't the only leaders, and it could not have happened without the mass movement phase of the civil rights movement. If there had not been, many, thousands of people who were willing to march, boycott, carry picket signs, and put themselves on the line to fight for justice. So, we shouldn't necessarily look for the next Dr. Martin Luther King. That's what's central to the book Be a King, that you can make a difference in your own community, at your own school, in your own city, by starting a revolution within yourself.
And that connects to our social justice day theme of being what? Do you remember? Well, with being a change maker, right? Being a change maker. And so thank you for sharing that, because that's really something that we need to remember as we enter into that study, and as we think about all of the things that we see happening in our world today.
And even kids can be change makers.
Absolutely.
That's what our first
Absolutely.
presentation of the day, that's the takeaway from that. You wanna add?
Yeah. So if you see something going on in the world or something that you disagree with, then it is up to you. If not you, then who? Think about if everybody was like, oh, the next person is going to take care of it, or the next person is going to take care of it. Somebody has to make that stand, and humans, we are definitely herd creatures. So when one person moves, we all begin to move. So it takes one. That's all it takes. One person to decide to make the move. And I guarantee if there's something that you disagree with, that there are other people that disagree with that exact same thing, and all you have to do is speak up about it to make other people speak up about it as well.
And young people often are leaders of revolutions. Jeffrey mentioned the Greensboro lunch counter sit-ins. They were started by college students, and they were carried on when the college students went home during the summer by high school students. In Birmingham, Alabama, there was a children's crusade, and the reason that young people could be so involved, is that they had less to lose than adults. If adults participated in protests, banks could call loans due, call mortgages due, they could lose their homes, they could be fired from jobs. Grown-ups had more to lose. Young people didn't own property necessarily. They didn't have careers. They might have had jobs, but they didn't have careers yet. So young people really can take the lead in many cases. You have one closing question or comment?
Like, we talked about hours of justice, like how many of them participated in, like, the civil rights?
How many, about what particular?
Like, allies of justice.
Oh, allies. I don't know how many participated, but I'll tell you this, I do have a book coming out in 2027 called Strength in Numbers, the Montgomery Bus Boycott, and it actually goes through the boycott and details of the boycott and talks about the numbers, how many miles were walked, how many, how much gasoline was needed to carry people back and forth to work who weren't riding the buses, how many days the boycott lasted, how many leaflets were handed out. So if you're interested in numbers, the numbers behind the protest movement, that'll be a good place to start. Strength in numbers.
I was gonna add, all of the pieces of history that are being named right now, we will be studying in depth. So I'm really excited that you're kind of given some information ahead of time.
All right, fourth grade, that had to be our final question, unfortunately, because you guys need to go home. Carolyn's
Yeah,
need to go home.
We have a song for you.
What do
Can
we
we
say?
all say thank you?
Thank you.
May I make one more announcement.
Yes.
One more
Fourth grade,
quick
hold on.
announcement. Jeffrey and I will be back in Philadelphia, or presenting again in Philadelphia this Sunday at the Barnes Foundation in the afternoon for Pico Free Sunday. So he'll be doing, if you want to hear more of him rap some more, come to that. We'll also be appearing at the African American Children's Book Fair at the Pennsylvania Convention Center from 1 to 4 p.m. on Saturday, February the 7th. So bring your families. It's a free event. And they're giving free books to the young people who get there early, you know, while supplies last.
What is it, like 10 and under? What?
All right, fourth grade friends, can we give another? Yes, I know.
Thank you.
All right, let's line up at the door, fourth grade. Thank
Oh my God.
Look up. They obviously did not come up with the Harrys.